This is the corner of Washington Avenue and Columbus Boulevard here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This is the site of the former Washington Avenue Immigration Station at Pier 53, bringing immigrants into Philadelphia. If you have an ancestor who lived or worked or arrived to the United States here in Philadelphia, then you need to visit this site. Now we're right here on Columbus Boulevard. Columbus Boulevard parallels I-95, so it's incredibly noisy. Right on the Delaware River here. And you see a biker just went by. Bike and walking paths allow you to get right up to the waterfront and take in all the sights in this very historic part of Philadelphia. You can kind of see in the distance there the Ben Franklin Bridge, and maybe you can see the masts of the Moshulu. But let's just take a minute here, because I think many people pass by this sign, and of course the sun just went in. Many people pass by this sign and might not realize what was here. And the sign reads, since the 1870s, the station was an entry point and processing center for immigrants, primarily from Eastern and Southern Europe. From here, newcomers moved into the city and other parts of the state, and really across the United States. It was demolished in 1915. So for genealogists researching in Philadelphia or tracing their family's roots from Philadelphia across the nation, this is a really important site. We'll take a walk down this path to the former site of the immigration station. And you can see we're at the corner of Washington Avenue and Columbus Boulevard. Here's the United States Coast Guard Station, number 1 Washington Avenue here in Philadelphia. And here's a marker for the Washington Avenue Pier. Let's take a walk. This site has been turned into gardens and a walking trail because the immigration station itself is no longer here. It was demolished in 1915. But ships still arrived here at Pier 53, and immigration processing occurred on board the ships. So another look at the Coast Guard Station. I was here in the winter, and I believe it was an extremely windy day, so you'll be able to hear me a little bit better than you did on that day. Now this path is marked. There is a trail. There are also some picnic benches, and of course, as soon as I start streaming, the clouds obscured the sun. When we get to the water, hopefully the sun will reappear. Philadelphia was not the only port of immigration. And just to dispel a myth, there are those who believe that everyone who landed in the United States had to come through Ellis Island, and that is not true. Ellis Island was one of the many ports of immigration. It was the busiest. It did receive the most overall. The port of Baltimore was the second busiest port, and other ports like Philadelphia and New Orleans also played their part. A few markers around the restoration that's been done in this area. So in the 1860s and 1870s, immigration to this part of the United States, particularly Pennsylvania, was mostly English, Irish. There's a Swedish population here. in Pennsylvania as well. But beginning in the late 1800s, the steamships arrived. And initially they had one purpose, and that was trade. The steamships were here to bring goods to and from the United States. Hey there, to and from predominantly Europe. But there was also a business in transporting people, as the United States needed workers to build out the railroad, which begun in Baltimore in 1828, but rapidly grew across the country. Now here in Philadelphia, you had competing railroads. And if you play Monopoly, you'll know what those competing railroads were. They were the Pennsylvania Railroad, the Reading Railroad, and of course the B&O here as well. Some remnants of piers here and a water marker. Hey Johnny, hello Jacksland, nice to see you. So as you travel down this path, look to the left, look to the right, you'll see the remnants of piers and the foundations of the buildings that sat upon them or near them. So into the 1870s, immigrants were coming into the country via those steamships. The American Steamship Company built Pier 53 here, which is what I'm standing on right now. Get a little bit of a view from here. And the American Steamship Company brought people from England and Southern and Eastern Europe right here to Philadelphia. And the railroad was close by. So as the immigrants came off the ships, they were processed at the immigration station that stood right here, but the building no longer exists. And then some of them hopped right on to trains to make their way to other destinations. The steamship company built the immigration station in 1873. And it was a busy one. Over its lifetime, welcoming over 1 million into the United States. Now, during World War I, at the outbreak, the United States was very careful about welcoming immigrants or not welcoming immigrants. And while Ellis Island remained extremely busy, as did Port of Baltimore, the traffic here in Philadelphia dried up a little bit. And the immigration station here closed in 1915 and it didn't reopen. So it was the outbreak of World War I, and we were not yet a participant in World War I at that time, that stopped the use of the immigration station here. The building was promptly demolished, and that's why there is no station remaining. But you can imagine huge steamships mooring right here. Right here. Great big, huge steamships would tie up right here. And immigrants from all over the world, predominantly England, Ireland, and Western Europe, would take their first steps on American soil right here. Now, just before they were allowed to disembark here, there was a requirement. I'm trying to see which way. Oh, I want to go this way. There was a requirement to have a medical exam. And there was a quarantine station just south of here on the Delaware River. And that quarantine station was called Lazaretto. Now, don't be confused, because the quarantine station in Baltimore was also called Lazaretto. And that's really confusing. So if you have documents that your ancestors were spent some time in quarantine at Lazaretto, it could have been Philadelphia or it could have been Baltimore. But then you find out where they landed. If they landed and disembarked here in Philadelphia, then you know it was the Philadelphia one. And you can stop by here and get a view of the still busy Delaware River. Traffic and transport and trade on this river has never stopped. From the earliest days of the United States until today. Just across the river is New Jersey, Camden, New Jersey to be exact. And you can get a better look at the Franklin Bridge right there. So if you had ancestors who arrived in the United States at Philadelphia, you can honor them by walking in their footsteps and coming here to the site of the 53rd Street Pier. I'm sorry, Pier 53, not 53rd Street. The Washington Avenue Pier, Pier 53. Here in Philadelphia. I am not climbing these steps, but this is a nice memorial. Quite tall. I am not climbing those steps. Here's a photograph of what the immigration station looked like, along with the story of the station. And it's not here anymore. Now, while we're here, and unfortunately, the sun just will not return. While we're here, let's talk a little bit about resources and destinations for your genealogical research in Philadelphia. Not too far from here on Spring Garden Street is the Philadelphia City Archives. Check out its collections online before making a trip here to find out how to access the collections. Philadelphia is also the home of one of the main locations of the United States National Archives. I know some folks believe it's just in Washington, D.C. There are locations of the National Archives all across the country, including Philadelphia. So if you're looking for a record, always start online. Find out which archives your documents are in, if they're not online. And they may be here in Philadelphia. The Free Library of Philadelphia has an amazing collection, including a map collection. There's an online mapping tool available to everyone. And there are also historic newspapers and historic books available only on site. So do your research and find out what you can find online and what you need to travel here for at the Free Library of Philadelphia. Philadelphia is full of historic cemeteries. And you may find members of your family, ancestors, and of course, many, many historic figures in those historic cemeteries in Philadelphia. The Philadelphia Museum of Art is a treasure trove of resources. If you're studying the decorative arts, if you want to know what a typical living room looked like in 18th century America, it's the Philadelphia Museum of Art. They have rooms with collections of home furnishings. It's quite amazing. The Pennsylvania Genealogical Society website is a wonderful treasure trove of information for genealogists studying their ancestors in and around Philadelphia. There are more sites than I can count managed by the National Park Service here in Philadelphia. There are so many national sites, not just around Independence Mall, but all throughout the city. There are so many examples of wonderful architecture dating back to the early 1700s and maybe late 1600s here. I'm not sure if it goes back to late 1600s, but the early 1700s. The nation's oldest continuously occupied street is Elfreth's Alley, and you can walk that street and see those beautiful historic residences. As you walk through Philadelphia here in 2026, keep an eye out for all of the America 250 events and attractions. Now, even if you don't have an ancestor who lived or worked or arrived in Philadelphia, Philadelphia, of course, is an important part of our American story. Independence Hall, the Liberty Bell, Ben Franklin's first printing press, the post office, the library, and all of the wonderfully preserved examples of early American architecture are important to any researcher, regardless of where your family entered the country. This has been a little short primary sources video. A little live walk around Pier 53, the former site of the Washington Avenue immigration station that served immigrants into the United States from 1873 until 1915. I wish you all the best in your research, and I hope to see you sometime out here in the field.